All right, here we go again. Another nice new edition to Celtics Beat. Thank you for being here with us. I'm Adam Kaufman. Certainly, you know, Evan Valenti, who's getting into, I don't know, Rocky shape right now, I think. Whatever he can do to I was going to say whatever he could do to beat off Drago, but I guess I just did. I guess it's still, you know, it still works. We can still do it.
Nailed it, buddy.
Yeah, nailed it.
I could use a workout though. This whole like COVID thing's trying to catch up to me. So
nailed it, and way to draw attention to it. Yeah. Right. We've got Dan Greenberg, Greeny, as you all know him on Twitter, who is here with us from Barstool. And you know, sometimes I think we need to be introspective, folks. I think sometimes we need to just sort of really be able to look in the mirror and know ourselves. And there was a point in time, maybe it was back in the Celtics 7 days on the Sports Hub, and you know, just all I've gotten a little lazy, I guess, on Twitter, but all the general interaction, especially around trade deadlines and free agency and every single game. And that there was a point in time, there really was. I believe this. This is not me being full of myself. I believe this to be true. There was a point in time where I think when people were looking for Celtics positivity, they were looking for green goggles. You know, they turned to me. You know, they turned to me. I was getting a lot of it in my Twitter interactions. But, you know, sometimes, folks, you got to kiss the ring. I have been surpassed. There is a new, as your colleague and our friend Jared Carabas likes to call himself, there is a new tribal chief for Twitter when it comes to Celtics basketball, certainly. And that is absolutely Dan Greenberg. Greeny, what's going on, buddy?
Well, that's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. Usually a statement like that is prefaced by calling you a homer or a green teamer. And I just, listen, I can't.
I think sometimes we need that in our lives, though. I think, you know, because there's so much negativity out there, especially concerning this team historically. Sometimes we need a nice, positive place to go.
I just think it's okay to remind people that, like, you don't have to hate your favorite basketball team. Like, it's okay to
imagine that,
enjoy
right?
watching them play. It's okay to be excited about them. I know that's not really, you know, always the blueprint for the city, which we all love, but it is okay to like, you know, your favorite basketball team. I just want to make that clear for the people out there.
Yeah, I mean, we do our best. I really do believe that we do our best on this show to call it as we see it. I really don't think, Evan, I mean, feel free to disagree with me here. I don't think we pander to any one side. You know, if things are going poorly, we call it out. If things are going well, we celebrate it. And I think we, you know, emphasize those two things. And I do believe that, because so much, you look at like and this is a good time for me to remind you, if you like Celtics Beat, or if you listen every week but you haven't subscribed, go to iTunes, subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff. I don't say that nearly enough, so we could always use more reviews and subscribers, and appreciate everybody that listens, obviously. But you read through the reviews, and I think that's evidence in and of itself. It's, you know, like Kaufman's too positive, you know, he's too negative. Valenti, same thing. You know, so I think that if we're, you know, rubbing people the wrong way or the right way, depending on how you want to look at it, then this, you know, I think it fits perfectly.
Yeah, and my pushback, and this is mostly due, a lot of what we heard last year was a down year. So you know that these weird narratives are going to pop up to pile on and sort of exacerbate things. But like, the negative things that I hear aren't even real, like, basketball things. Like, oh, Jayson and Tatum aren't friends, so you got to split them up. Or like, oh, Brad doesn't motivate his players. It's like those things. It's like, we can talk and be negative or critical of like actual basketball reasons and things that have merit. What I always push back about, and where I think people just call me a blind green teamer, is like when we're debating things that have nothing to do with basketball, and they didn't exist when the team, like, nobody talked about the two J's friendship when they were going to the Eastern Conference Finals. But in a down year where they have injuries and COVID and all that stuff, oh, now we got to split them up because like they don't hang out when, like, who the hell knows what they do off the court. So that's just what bothers me, is like, I'm all for being critical of, you know, bad ball movement, lackadaisical defense. Like, there's plenty of stuff that has actual substance you can talk about. It's the other stuff that's like, okay, this is clearly just a narrative for entertainment. People need to understand that. and not like form actual basketball opinions off it. That's what annoys me.
I just don't even get how it's entertaining to sit there and talk about like these guys aren't close enough. And I just to build on what you're talking about, like obviously for anyone that hasn't seen it, good friend of this program, Chris Forsberg, NBC Sports Boston, did a great job of. I'm kind of surprised it hadn't happened sooner, and maybe it's pandemic restrictions and that sort of thing, tougher to get one-on-ones or sit both guys down if you're a rights holder or anybody out there in the media, but finally getting both of them, Tatum and Brown, to not just sit down and talk about one another, but to sit down and talk about one another together in the same room and dissect this friendship. And it's look, nothing came out of it that you wouldn't expect to come out of it. You think they're going to sit next to each other and say, no, of course, obviously everything's great. Like, oh, Tatum saying sometimes he babysits my son. And, Brown with talking about the gold medal, which obviously he couldn't participate with Team USA because of the injury this year. And, what you want for yourself, you want for your brother and all of that stuff. It's great. Like clearly they are aligned. I just think the whole narrative about the relationship between stars in general, it's sort of funny in this way. Like you think of like Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving are the best of friends. How's that working out in Brooklyn right now? He certainly hasn't been able to get Kyrie vaccinated so he can participate in home games this season. Or Milwaukee, who obviously just won a championship. Does anyone ever talk about the dynamic off the floor in terms of Giannis Antetokounmpo and Chris Middleton or Drew Holiday? No, never. Unless, I don't know, I got to drill down on my Milwaukee Bucks stories coming out of Wisconsin, but I don't think anybody is ever talking about that, especially on a national level. And maybe this is the root of it. Maybe it's because they're two wildly different players. They don't overlap at all positionally, anything like that. And it comes back to what Sean Devaney's talked about on this show a number of times, and Cedric Maxwell's talked about, Kevin Garnett has talked about nationally. Is there a redundancy there in terms of the players on the floor? And that turns into the whole conversation about how do these guys coexist?
Yeah, and I think, and I'm not going to take credit for it. I saw it on Twitter. I can't remember. It was just like a random, it got thrown on my feed. But another duo is like, when have you heard people question Steph Curry and Klay Thompson? And if they hang out off the court, they've found a way to be pretty successful. And to your position,
might have been me. I tweeted this yesterday. I don't give it. See, I don't care about any of this stuff. Like this, Steph and Klay, like Steph's the greatest teammate ever. So that works out really well. And Klay just is this super laid back guy. Nobody can, and they've won multiple rings together. Even throw Draymond in there, who's a hornet's nest, still works. Nobody questions that. Did anybody question, do Rafael Devers and Xander Bogaerts, do they get along? Where's that story? Like,
here's my pushback on that one. It's just a different sport.
No, but like you have to get along with your teammates. I don't care how many play. Like, okay, let's go to hockey. Where's the Marchand and Bergeron story? Like, just because
hockey's fine. Like, hockey works. But we talk about their relationship all the time and how close they are and how much they love and respect one another. I just don't think in baseball it works because, as we've seen from Mike Trout, Shohei Ohtani, like one guy cannot carry a baseball team. It just can't happen. Look at Jacob deGrom and the Mets all these years. But in basketball, where you have to work together, where there's a fluidity, where there's a chemistry, where you have to coexist. And hockey, obviously, like hockey absolutely fits. Football, baseball doesn't really work. I think that's why that narrative isn't a thing there.
Like none of those stories exist. Like I don't care. Like no hockey. There's not a hockey story like that. It seems to be solely focused on these two guys specifically. Like I can make the argument, I guess, for like Ben and Joel is the other version of that. Like they didn't get along on, but they clearly didn't work on the court. Like that is a clear. Like those two guys can't coexist on the floor together because the spacing is all screwed up. Right? It doesn't work. You look at other duos in the league.
Doesn't Gasper always say that winning is the ultimate deodorant? I feel like that's like a classic Gasper line. So I feel like we've heard so, and think of the teams that we have mentioned, right? The Bucks, the Warriors, they win. We didn't hear any of this stuff about the two Jays when the Celtics weren't having a year from hell. So that's what I'm interested to see this year. And if, they have the normal health, like they don't need perfect health, but if things are, a normal NBA season, and they have the success that we've grown accustomed to during their tenure, I doubt we'll see those same unnamed sources, speaking to so-and-so. I think it was just when they struggle, those are the things that get created. And you just you have no one to blame but yourself, be better on the floor. And those things, won't become a media sort of tornado.
Maybe this is me I don't know if it's a hot take or if it's just like scratching an itch, basically. But when's the last time you can think of two Celtic stars where we debated how well or if they got along, if they could coexist on the floor? It like not this stuff. I feel like you almost have to go back to like the 80s when when it wasn't even really a thing because to your point, Greeny, they were winning, so who gives a crap? But like before, and here's where the scratching an itch part comes into play. Before Kyrie Irving was here, who was the ultimate superstar who just doesn't get along with anybody, this was never a thing. Like no, and again, like Tatum and Brown, they were young, they were barely in the league, they were having success, so it wasn't, it fits to what you were just talking about, where maybe it wasn't just timely. There weren't these struggles, but until the 18-19 season, when everything gradually started to go to crap, in a Celtic sense compared to expectations. Obviously, they haven't gone to crap overall, but you know what I mean? Like this was never a narrative. This was never a thing. Like we didn't even really, I'm trying to remember, like we never even really had this media work differently, but we never even really had this conversation with like Paul Pierce and Antoine Walker. We certainly didn't, in the new Big Three era, the Ray Allen thing was legitimate. Like that wasn't a media creation. That was so if anyone's like listening and just shouting Ray Allen, idiot, Ray Allen, Rondo, like that was a real thing. That wasn't just talking heads. Like this is talking heads. There is no evidence whatsoever that we know about publicly where Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are not on the same page.
That's what was always my biggest point is like, we hear this narrative, it gets spun into be treated as fact. And it's like, okay, show me the evidence where they're like, fighting on the bench or like, there's a video clip of them, publicly dogging the other one, like with their inner circle. They're just, none of that stuff existed. And I think to your point, if the media and the need for daily content existed during the Antoine Pierce era, my guess is we probably would have had some of that, in the early 2000s. But again, as you all know, the team wasn't good. So of course there would have been that same sort of, rift or quote unquote rift between the two.
And Pierce did want out.
Yeah, and he did eventually want out until, Danny or Kevin McHale saved us. But
yeah,
it's just one of those things where I truly think, if they're going to speak publicly together, we're going to get quotes like we saw yesterday, which obviously I'm going to eat up because it fits my narrative. There could be somebody who has, opposite narrative that's going to take, an unnamed source quote and treat that as fact because it fits their narrative. At the end of the day, if this team wins, no one's going to be talking about their off-court relationship. It's just I personally think they mesh well together on the court. That's all I truly care about. But we need to see it translate into wins, and then all the other stuff will just, fizzle out, I think.
Yeah, these guys might not be Steph and Clay, but they're not Kobe and Shaq either. So there's like two sides of the spectrum here. Like again, Steph is the greatest teammate of all time. He's phenomenal. Everything you read about Steph's personality is like, yeah, that's exactly what you'd want in a teammate. And Clay is slowly back. Meanwhile, Shaq and Kobe legitimately hate each other, and it's not like it took what years for them to score that beef off, and like they say that they took care of it, but did they I don't know. We have to go by their word here. It's similar here with Jaylen and Jayson, but what makes me, I guess, like happy in a sense is just like how funny, and like how you can tell in the interview that they found the fact that they have to do 5 minutes in this like sort of ridiculous.
It's absurd.
It's like Tatum's like, he's like, man, I hate that they have an unhealthy obsession with our relationship. And I'm like, I freaking agree with that. People care way too much about whether they hang out all the time, outside of basketball. Look, you're spending a lot of time with these people throughout the entire season. You don't have to spend every second with them off the court too. Like you need some time to yourself. So I'm glad somebody did it. I'm glad they did it. Let's just get this out of the way. It's so dumb. But it really doesn't matter at all. As long as you get together along on the court, it's fine. Nobody cares.
As long as the basketball fit works, I'll put up with anything.
Well, plus if we're going to spend time truly like wasting time, it's which we're kind of doing on this show, but I don't know, it's fun. I feel like this is a topic that at least this side of the topic needs to be exhausted a little bit just to call everybody else stupid. If we're going to waste time to like media driven narratives that aren't true or even possibly realistic. Can't we at least focus on like the negative ones? Like, boy, you see Donovan Mitchell out there tweeting about the Patriots and
No, I'm eating that up too, though. I'm into
tweeting
that.
about the Red
Oh, I think
Sox
that's
and
the
like
long play. Everybody- if you
of
know
course this
Donovan
guy
Mitchell's
wants to
in
be a
the long
Celtic.
play, for sure.
I love this. See, I love every I painted to this so because it all started in the bubble when Jaylen.
Wait, when's the Bruins tweet? Just give me the Bruins tweet, Donovan, and then I'm locked in.
I'm so into it. He's like, man, Fenway's rocking. And I'm like, yeah, bro, it's awesome. You should totally check it out.
Like that dude in the red sleeves.
Yeah, I mean, like, dude, could you make it any more obvious? And then, of course, you listen to Lowe and Simmons on their podcast this week talking about how, like, you know, is this a make or break year for Donovan Mitchell and the Jazz? Like, if it doesn't go well, you know, at what point maybe does Donovan ask out? Because and like that's part of the reason why they brought Dwayne Wade in is because Donovan looks up to Wade, and you know Wade can be like on his shoulder, and they can have that voice in his ear to keep maybe in Utah. But like all the stuff he's tweeting nowadays about New England sports, I'm not gonna lie, definitely just my ears are up, and like I'm all over this. I think it's great.
I swear, just like give me just one tweet from Donovan Mitchell saying like, "Damn, I got to try that Pasternak pasta," and I am I'm locked in. I will go out. I will go to NBA.com and I will make a Mitchell Celtics jersey.
I mean, it's when you think about it, right? It's the perfect like stealth, page out of Danny Ainge's old playbook where like we're all talking Bradley Beal or Zach LaVine. Meanwhile, it's like, okay, they unloaded Kemba's deal. Those extensions happened, which eliminated, in theory, their cap space for this summer. But you keep looking down. You see when Donovan Mitchell expires. You see, what their cap situation could look like in the next 2-3 years. And it's like, he does fit the age timeline of your two best players. He does seem to have a real friendship with Jaylen Brown. Like, maybe that has always been the long play. And, they're signing Rob and Smart and all these to the extensions in the event that doesn't become possible. Okay, we still have a core that we like, but I know I've been tweeting about it ever since I see all of them putting out videos in the bubble together, like Jaylen's bothering the hell out of Mitchell. It's like they're all hanging out. It's like, okay, I think there might be a little, espionage going on here that no one's really paying attention to.
I just love all the jerks that responded to my tweet with you're not really jerks if you're listening. I love you just the same, but all, trying to crush the dream. Like he's from Connecticut. He went to school in New Hampshire, like things like of course he's a New England sports fan. Doesn't matter. Like this is, I'm right near, I am a walking version. I've even got a Brad t-shirt on. I am a walking version of the Greeny Brad picture in response to tweets. That's what we're doing right now.
If I see any sort of shamrock on any one of his posts or profiles or anything, I'm gonna
scouring his Instagram profile.
Yeah, that's
who's he responding to? What's he writing about?
Keep track of his likes on Twitter, man. There might be some in there. You never know.
Yep.
It could be the red flag. That's all I'm saying.
Take jazz out of his profile or whatever. All right, let's talk about what matters and what is happening, and not the fact the team is 1-0 in the preseason, nice as that is, and a nice game winner there, Romeo Langford. That was exciting. But, I think the bigger takeaways are obviously, one, you got Jaylen Brown, who says he's at 75-80% and looked just locked in game one after the wrist surgery, 25 points. Tatum obviously did pretty well. Both those guys and everybody, minutes were limited as you expect. I think a lot of interesting comments out of Ime Udoka, the new head coach so far, with, the defensive emphasis and obviously playmaking, and we're not gonna, in his words, we're not gonna bitch at the refs anymore. Like, our guys need to stop doing that. We need to all be on the same page. He's going to tighten the rotation. There are a lot of different things that have come out so far, among other things, obviously, and we were talking about some of them off air before we started the show. What are the big takeaways you have so far early in camp?
So it was tough because I think we were all like foaming at the mouth for that first preseason game, just with guys back, new system, new everything. Outside of like the first couple possessions in the first quarter where they made it abundantly obvious that they were going to overpass to sort of stress this idea of ball movement, as the game went on and, they're playing a team of lower, a lower tier team in theory of the Magic, I saw a lot of the
lower
same
tier.
stuff.
We can come out and say they are flat out lower tier. That's okay.
Yeah,
That's
Yeah,
that's
but you
a
know what I mean. I
that's a
want to give
wholesale
them
rebuild
their,
right there.
We'll see what they end up being, but in theory, a lower team. I still saw a lot of the same things that annoyed me last year. I thought their perimeter defense wasn't great. Robert Williams still struggled on switches. They gave up, 18, 19 threes to one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the league. They didn't really assert themselves and create that separation. They were in a dogfight all the way, obviously, until Romeo's game winner. So part of me is like, okay, it's the first game. Let's see. It's a teaching opportunity. They'll get film on it. Ime will walk them through. So that's why I'm so interested to see tomorrow night, because the second key unit came in, still couldn't score, just like last year's second unit couldn't score. And obviously maybe there are nerves with guys like Schroder and Horford being back, but I'm still nervous about Josh Richardson's shooting. I'm still nervous about how they're going to be able to score when, the Jays aren't on the floor. So my hope is that we get answers to those questions as they continue to play in the preseason. But for me, it was like, okay, I can see that they're trying to pass the ball more, which is great. They're playing with much more energy, which is great. But their result was very similar to me of the type of a Celtic game that we all experienced last year.
Yeah, I mean, look at the offensive numbers weren't tremendous. Rob Williams going 0 for 7 is sort of that's not going to happen too many times from here to the rest of the season. I mean, he was taking jump shots, and look,
I was going to say all mid-range jumpers.
I'm cool with that. Like, I'm not mad about that. I think he should experiment in the preseason doing that kind of stuff. I think that's exactly what the preseason's for. So again, I don't have any issues with that at all whatsoever. It's more about some guys shaking the rust off, learning how to play with each other. Like, and this is all going to be stuff that takes time. But I'm with you on this one, Greeny. I'm not gonna lie. Maybe we'll get to this a little bit later. Part of me, I'm a little worried about Pritchard because I think Schroeder's excellent. I think he's exactly what they kind of need, and that's where the bench scoring might primarily come from. A guy like that. But yeah, it's not going to be Neesmith. It's not going to be Pritchard. It's not going to be Josh Richardson. Somebody's going to have to take onus of that second unit. And you've heard Ime talk about staggering Jaylen and Jayson and how they're going to make that work. Mm-hmm. But I mean, the bench numbers, Horford was 2 for 6. Grant only took 2 shots, so it wasn't like it was a huge deal. Schroeder 1 for 7. Richardson 1 for 8. Pritchard 3 for 9. So, there's some rough shooting numbers in there. And look, it's the first game, knock the rust off, whatever. But I'm with you. That's scoring, that second unit scoring is going to be really tough. And that's why it's really important on the offensive end the defensive end to do well.
Yeah. And I would think, for me, what I wanted to see initially, because like you said, as they practice more, as guys get more familiar with how Ime wants to play, I think, the third, the fourth, those preseason games, you can put a little more stock into the box score numbers and how the production looks. Right away, I just wanted to see, will they pass the ball? Will they play with energy? The things that were not very consistent last year that have nothing to do with system or, you don't need to know a system to play hard. And I think that's what we saw right away is I saw a team that played, like they cared. And I think that was great. The production to be determined. We have to see it come through. But I'm interested to see if Schroder, because he's not that good of an off-ball player, he's a 32, 33% three-point shooter, can Pritchard thrive in that role? But if he's also going to be playing with, one of the Jays, is he even going to touch the ball? I felt like he was out there and he wasn't even he didn't even touch the ball for possessions. And when he did, it was the early Pritchard where he was the freshman playing with varsity where he would catch the ball, dribble 2 or 3 times and immediately pass it. If he's going to be an off-ball player on the second unit, I need him to just catch it, grip it, and rip it and let it fly and, trust his development as a shooter.
Let's take a quick break, tell you about our good friends at the Legends brand who powered this show today, an athlete-owned apparel brand that is popping up seemingly everywhere these days. I've been tweeting about them as well. Many pro locker rooms, you can find Legends apparel, and on today's some of today's top athletes as well. Legends is owned in part by athletes like Steve Nash, Matt Barnes, Baker Mayfield, NFL legend, local hero Willie McGinnis, part of the family, even former Celtic Marcus Morris Sr., many others as well. Legends makes high performance apparel with the style and comfort you will want to wear all day. Evan, if you are watching the video, rocking the hoodie as he always does. He doesn't take it off. I tell you that all the time.
I have washed
normally
it to just curtail all of
you
the
wash it.
I do wash this. So
you wash it, then you put it immediately back on. You don't even wait for it to dry, but it's a performance fit, so that's okay. It dries on you. Normally I'm wearing the sweatshirt or the t-shirt, but I decided today I'm gonna bring the t-shirt along so I can really get it close to the camera and show it to you. Show you this great material. I wish you could feel the cotton right through here, but you can see it. You can see how nice it's thick. It's right. We got Nike, we got nylon and polyester. It's a work hard, stay humble, all this great stuff from Legends. Here's the logo right here.
Yeah, the polyester makes it more durable, and the nylon makes it stretch. So if you're curious as to why Adam read those, the performance wear is built mainly on those two fabrics, right? Or things like those fabrics. So you have who everybody hates if you buy a shirt for, if you buy a t-shirt for $60, like if it gets ruined in 3 wears or 3 washes, like you're gonna be pissed. The polyester in that shirt makes it more durable. Nylon makes it stretchable. My question for Kaufman: have you tried? You got the shorts, right?
Got the shorts too, yeah.
Okay. Did we figure out, like, are you supposed to, like, do you wear underwear with that? Do you not wear underwear with that? Like, how does that work? Because you got the inside like built in. You know what I'm talking about? Like, there's that built in like.
No, I hear you. It's not a riddle I found an answer to yet. Have
you tried both ways? Because I tried both ways and they both feel fine. So I'm just kind of figuring out.
Do you have a favorite though? Do you lean in one direction?
Do you have to say it?
I don't know if you want to know the answer to that.
I feel like now I know the answer. I don't think you need to say it.
It's marvelous.
But that's okay because you feel safe.
It's a safe.
You feel protected.
It's fine.
Yeah, it's terrific. Listen, visit legends.com today. See why athletes everywhere and us are swapping out the big box brands for Legends apparel. Use BEAT20, that is the code BEAT20, and save 20% on your first order. Again, legends.com, promo code BEAT20. Offer ends October 10th, which, if you are paying attention, is Sunday, just a couple of days away from when this thing is being released to all of you. So depending on when you're listening, you better act quickly. Again, BEAT20, legends.com, offer ends October 10th. So yeah, I love it. It's great. Greeny, you need to make the move, man.
No, that looks.
You're a tall drink of water. It'll fit you great.
That fabric looks pretty soft.
It's awesome. It's fitted too. I wear this all the time. I walk my dog in the morning. Like now I got to throw something else on. It's like 40.
Getting a little cold out there for you.
So it's not like I'm up at like 7. It's like 5:50 this morning when I went out to walk the dog, because that's when she gets up. So
the morning dew and all that stuff out there.
Yeah, and you gotta be comfortable. You gotta be comfortable. And this definitely gives you comfort, and it gives you style, and it gives you warmth. So it's like the trifecta essentially.
Let's go back to talking about these C's here, and some of the individuals that we've been talking about. Let's get a little more expansive. For one, Josh Richardson. Now, obviously, this guy, there were headlines at the time that they traded for him, and hopefully it'll be a bounce back year, and he's going to shoot better, and he's going to defend relentlessly, and he's going to fit great. And then that, we fast forward to him getting an extension, even team friendly, maybe, obviously, depending on how he plays, and a tradable contract doesn't mean he's going to be here for 2 years, but nevertheless, a lot of people just breaking down what all this means. You watch preseason game number 1, and I don't want this to be a takeaway on preseason game number 1 as much as it's just an extension of what we saw last year throughout an entire regular season. Do we have to worry this guy's washed?
I don't know. I think his debut was pretty much like how he's advertised, right? I thought his defense was legit. He had, he was good on the perimeter. Everything that we've heard about him being an on-ball defender, I think we saw. But on the flip side, everything we saw about his shaky shooting, like that showed up. His form legit gives me anxiety when I see him. It's like he comes up, it's all broken. Like not even from 3, like even on his little 15, 16 foot jumpers, it's just one of those where like you close your eyes and hope it goes in. Whereas you look at, someone like a Tatum, a Brown, a Pritchard, like when they shoot it, I'm surprised that they miss. When I'm watching Josh Richardson take those pull-ups, I'm surprised if he makes it. So, I'm hoping maybe part of that.
Don't worry, there
just
wasn't a lot of that in game one.
I know, but I'm thinking that's why, and I sort of want to expand on this to a question to both of you. When it comes to, their starting five, a lot of people think he's going to be the starting wing. Are you okay with having a non-floor spacer in that 3 spot? Or do you lean more towards maybe a double big with Horford and Rob, maybe one big with Neesmith eventually starting? Because I just think they can get value out of him for his defense, but that jumper is giving me no signs of confidence that it's going to be any different than what we just saw in Dallas.
Ev, I'll let you go first.
I could make the argument that because you got to stagger the Tatum Brown minutes. I don't think I wouldn't start him. Let's just start there. I would not start Josh Richardson. I would make him like the first sub for Jaylen.
Yeah. So then are you going double big or are you going?
I want the double big.
Smith?
I think they'll end up with the double big to start.
Mhm.
I think Neesmith starting is look, there's an obvious if he's gonna knock down 40% of his threes, and that's great. They need a floor spacer like that, whether it's going to be a starter or a guy off the bench. So, I mean, it doesn't matter. I think to start the year, they'll go with the guys that they know. And I think, Ime and Brad's past history with Al will dictate that he starts.
Especially with everybody talking about how Al's found the fountain of youth.
Exactly.
And he looks
great.
as good as he had and feels as good as he has.
The words were out of my mouth. That was my next point. Is like they seem to be hyping him up. So I think that's where they're headed. And I don't have any problem with that because I do think it's better than it was. We had like a whole podcast dedicated to this a couple weeks ago. How the double big lineup with Rob and Al makes way more sense than Tice and Tristan. Okay. So I think they'll start there. Richardson for me is not a starter. And I even if it's matchup dependent, I don't care for the offense that he can't provide, but I do think defensively he brings a lot. And I think if you're Jaylen Brown, finding a way to partner those two guys together is like one guy's on, one guy's off. You don't lose defense at that spot with either guy. I mean, I think, Jaylen has had times where he's slipped defensively because he isn't totally focused on that end, but then we've seen him guard Kevin Durant and do really well. So it's just a matter of, is Jaylen focused or not and doing enough on that end. Richardson knows he has to hang his hat on that end. So I think having that guy off the bench is nice, but having him and Smart at the floor at the same time, with Jaylen, Jayson, and Al as your starting five, like I don't love it. I don't love it. I think they'd be better off with Rob in there or Neesmith, who really gives you some shooting.
Yeah,
I want the double bigs. I think the double bigs make sense. I also think keeping some level of offense on your bench so that we have some balance to the rotation to the lineup. If Neesmith can be a reliable offensive performer, and I'm not talking about him averaging 15 points or something like that, but I don't know, giving you something in the 8 to 10, 11 window, something like that. And then obviously if Schroder can give you around 15 off the bench, which obviously historically he's been able to do. When you look back a couple of years ago when he was with the Thunder and scoring practically 20 off the bench largely. I mean, if they can do that, and if even if Richardson's not shooting well, he's a guy that can get you 10 points. So imagine if he actually is. If you can have some of that balance off the bench, which they really did not have last year and was such a problem. We talked about it so often, just sort of, have that sort of staggered rotation, staggered build. I don't think to go back to something Brad Stevens said all the time, I don't think it's the biggest deal in the world who starts versus, just what your rotations are and what your combinations are. Because as you know, guy can start getting into foul trouble and he's out 45 seconds into a game. It only has so much meaning. But the double big, I'm drawn to it. I really like it. I'm intrigued by what it looks like with a Rob Williams that is now, unlike when he came into the league and Horford was here, now he's more comfortable. He's gotten the bag. He's farther into his NBA career. I want to see what this looks like and how these guys can coexist, because to go and I don't mean the relationship, I mean just on the floor and how they play together, because again, to kind of go full circle with the show, guys, like we spent so much time off the top talking about how, I don't know, to go all meme on it. It's like, like everybody, like Jason and Jaylen can't exist and they hate each other and they're not best friends and blah, 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 blah. Nobody. Rob Williams wants to be adopted by Al Horford. That is their relationship right now. Like Jared Weiss, who was on the show recently, writing the article about that for The Athletic the other day. Like it's these guys and especially it comes from Rob above all else, but both of these guys, they are obsessed with one another. I mean, Al is truly taking it. He's seeing the light. He's always been a leader in terms of mentoring and working well with guys on his team, a great teammate, all of that stuff. But now as he sees the light at the end of the tunnel in terms of his NBA career, seems he's really going next level in terms of wanting to mentor guys and wanting to take guys under his wing, more so than we've ever seen before, if I'm not mistaken. Some of it, I guess, last year in very limited time with the dude in OKC who was here for 3 seconds, but we're really seeing it now with Rob Williams, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I kind of lean towards your way of thinking, because I'm totally with you that the double big of Al and Rob is nothing like our previous double big experience. Neither Tice or Tristan Thompson, passed anywhere close to the level that either of those bigs can do. So you can run your offense through Rob in the high post. You can put Al on the top of the arc and, use him to stretch the floor. And I also think when it comes to Josh Richardson, what was one of the biggest things we saw last year with the second unit was when the NBA caliber players came out and it went all young guys, there just wasn't enough NBA caliber talent in those lineups. So I'm more off the lines of, if let's say you start Nesmith, you can have a second lineup with more NBA quality players. So you're not going on these, 10-0 run, 10-2 runs in the blink of an eye, just because there's no, there's not a high enough level of talent. What I did find interesting though, is Ime basically said, listen, I'm not going to have this fluid starting lineup based on matchup. We're going to have our 5 guys and we're going to stick to that, which I thought was pretty interesting, because I would have imagined, okay, maybe a team like Philly that has Drummond and Embiid and maybe a bigger, front court, you would go double big. But if you're playing someone like the Warriors or a team that plays with a super fast pace, why wouldn't you want to switch it up, start one big and have an extra shooter in Nesmith? So those are the things of Ime we just don't know yet, because we've obviously never seen his rotation in a real season, and maybe that'll be adjusted as we see different combinations and what works and what doesn't. But I'm just of the belief of, I want to surround, if you go back to what Brad said when he traded Kemba, he said, everything we do is to maximize Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. For me, I want them with as many floor spacers and shooters as possible. So if I can start Horford at the 5, have him be the first sub out, and, have him come back in with the second unit so him and Schroder can run pick and roll, great. But I want guys that defenses are going to have to respect in terms of their 3-point shooting, knowing that you're already starting Marcus Smart, and he's a 34% shooter. If Aaron Nesmith can shoot 38, 39% to the point where defenses have to respect him, that opens up your driving lanes. Then you factor in everything we hear from Drew Hanlon and Ime about how they want Tatum to play more downhill and attack the basket. Well, you need guys to create driving lanes. So that's why I think in a perfect world, Aaron Nesmith by the trade deadline has played his way into being a full-time starter. I think that would be our perfect ideal scenario. We're not there yet, but I think that's where we end up.
No love for Juancho and Gomez, huh? Can't get a little,
People wondering if that dude's even going to be in the rotation.
The combination we saw on Monday plays well. I don't think you can rule that out, because he does stretch the floor. If they want to protect, Tatum or Jaylen from having to guard power forwards and bang those bodies throughout an entire season, you could see it. I mean, if he can just hit spot up threes, he was one of the guys I talked about their energy and effort. Juancho was everywhere. It was I can't say I watched a ton of him in Minnesota and all that, but just if he's going to be a guy who doesn't care about touching the ball and just wants to make hustle effort plays, sure, spot start him while you're trying to figure out what, combinations work.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's fine, but you need guys, like you said, you need guys like that. You need guys are going to crash. He had an offensive rebound, I think early in the game, where you're where the hell did he come from? Where is, but that's the stuff you need, energy plays like that. That's why Cantor, as much as we all loathe watching Cantor play pick and roll defense, his activity down low matters. Like Juancho, if he can find a way to separate himself from everybody else with that just one element, that extra possessions matter. They add up at the end of the game. So I mean, look, he's not going to start. There's no way. But the fact that he was even thought about in that shows you maybe some positive signs going that direction. That's all.
In the interest of time, obviously, we'll go a little bit longer, but we've talked about him a few times, and now he's finally here. He's playing. There's been a lot of talk around him, most especially because of what could have been for him financially. Dennis Schroder, depending. There's a little bit of debate out there in the social media world as to how he actually pronounces his name. So maybe we could get him to say it. And until then, I'll just call him Dennis. I'm excited. I am excited not only about the contract they got him on, because I think it's just such a no-brainer to add a guy with that skill set and a vet and that ability, that talent who can come in at less than $6 million. Why in the hell wouldn't you? I mean, it's like the Knicks adding Kemba Walker for like $8 million a year. You absolutely do it, and you just take any potential whatever that comes along with it. But I think this guy's going to be a really good fit, and I'm not sure we're spending, believe it or not, enough time on that. I think initially there was a lot of, I don't want that guy from people. He's not a good fit. He's not a good locker room guy. He's not a, whatever. And now there's not nearly enough of the, what, like if this guy doesn't go out of his way to be disruptive in the sense that he's, chasing all that lost money, and he just plays his role, does whatever is asked of him, and is the vet that everyone knows he's capable of being. And by the way, does everything that so far he has indicated he's going to do. Like, so far, no problems. He's been great. He's been a model teammate, and Al Horford loves him, and he gets along with everybody there. If he's this guy, I think he's going to be a wonderful addition to this team.
Yeah, I just don't think it's very often you see starting caliber point guards signed for $6 million. So, yeah. Right, just that point alone is like, for a team that had a real point guard depth issue post free agency, entering the draft, and then post free agency, like, you looked at the Celtics point guard depth chart when it was, Marcus, Pritchard, Chris Dunn, like, Carson Edwards, you're like, this is iffy. So just adding a starting caliber talent is obviously an upgrade. But I thought it was really interesting when they entered this postseason, the one thing that both Brad and Ime made abundantly clear to everybody were their roles. And I think we heard so much of that last year where, guys didn't really know who their roles, what their roles were, how they fit, all that stuff. If you listened, I think it was Jared Weiss, could have been Jay King. It was one of the Athletic writers. When they talked about that signing, they said, listen, Ime in the meeting and Brad made it very clear to Schroder that Marcus Smart is the starting point guard. There's not going to be any of this baloney once we get into camp. Like, your role here is our primary backup point guard. Either you accept that or you don't. And he signed on for it. So I think that's done wonders just initially of, everyone's entering the season knowing what the pecking order is, knowing what their role is. If they get the 2019 OKC six-man Dennis Schroder, it elevates their ceiling. There's no, I mean, he was almost a 18, 19 point per game player off their bench. He accepted that role. It was great. Where I think we don't know is like, okay, is he going to want to play now that he signed for $5 million? Is he going to try to force things as the sixth man to try to like overcompensate and show the rest of the league, hey, I'm worthy of a legit contract next year? In my opinion, he's going to get that contract if he is able to play within that role and thrive like when he was on OKC. So while it's great that he has a skill set that they need, he seems to accept his role. What we don't know yet is once he's given the keys of those second unit, is he going to only look for himself? And I think he was one of the guys in the first preseason game. You could see he was overpassing every time he touched the ball. It was like he wanted to stress that he was going to be a facilitator, and that was awesome. But when we're a month or two into the season, like, how does that change if the second unit, like if nobody else can score, is he going to try to force things and be something that maybe the team doesn't need for him in his ideal role. That's just what we don't know yet.
Well, I'll point out though, because he's going to give them something they don't have a ton of, and that's guys that can get into the paint with the ball in their hands. Like they just have like I love Smart. Smart's not blowing by too many guys, right? You know, Pritchard's the same way. Neesmith takes about 3 dribbles and you're pretty much done at that point. You know, Tatum and Brown, we know they can do that. We've seen it a lot. Anybody that wants to talk about the first step of Jaylen and Jayson being slow, you're not watching basketball correctly. But what Schroder gives you is that speed element with the ball in his hands that they don't have. And what's going to be so important, I think Green did a great job mentioning the chemistry he has with Al Horford from their past days in Atlanta. That's going to be big. I didn't think about how those two guys off the bench or, you know, playing on a unit together with maybe some guys that, you know, that aren't Jaylen and Jayson, how important that's going to be. But they're going to need that skill from him desperately because their guards don't have speed. You know, Pritchard's a crafty player. I love him to death. I think he's awesome, but he's not going to blow by, get too many guys. Smart doesn't either. Smart's a bully ball point guard, and we'll see, you know, how the new Marcus Smart looks as a primary distributor. I'm excited for what we'll see. Schroder needs to be aggressive, especially with that second unit because, again, the lack of scoring, but he gives you the ability to get inside the paint, which they've lacked. You know, I love Kyrie. He was part of that. You know, he could do that at will when he felt like it. Kemba at first could do it, but after the injury, rough. Yeah. And that was the thing with Isaiah Thomas that I don't think people appreciate enough. Isaiah at his height could still find ways to get into the paint and draw the attention to himself. And that's such a crucial part of being a point guard in today's NBA. Like, it's not just about distributing the basketball. You got to score too. Now, there are guys that are way the other way that are really score heavy and don't do a lot of distributing. Dennis is going to have to do both. But in this particular instance, he gives them something that they don't currently have. And that's why that's why I'm worried for Pritchard a little bit. And I'm worried about Pritchard's role because Dennis is going to give them that. Pritchard can't. So does Pritchard get relegated to like an off-ball 2 guard? He's too small for that position, right? So how they make this work, again, Ime and Brad and everybody else has got to figure that out. But I think Dennis's role is very clear in this team. And to go from Jeff Teague, who is an NBA champion,
I know,
Dennis Schroder is a real nice pickup for Boston, no question.
Yeah, and to your point about, you know, the previous Celtics guards like Isaiah and Kyrie and healthy Kemba, if you looked at how those offenses ranked, those were top 5 offenses in the league because they were able to get into the paint. You look at last year where they were the middle of the pack, you didn't have that same sort of consistent attacking, drawing in the defense, kicking it out to shooters. That just didn't exist. So I am interested to see if he can keep that up when the games matter. But I think it is important that we all remember he's going to shoot, mid 40s from the floor and 33% from 3. So I think, there are zones on the floor where I want the majority of his shots to come from. I'm down for him floaters, layups, attacking the rim, things like that. Where I just fear is you could tell in that preseason game when I think it was either the beginning of the 4th quarter, the end of the 3rd, when like nobody could score, he was settling for the 3s. And those are the types of issues that I saw last year that we saw on Monday is like when they were going through their scoring drought with that second unit, where was the attacking of the basket? Everybody was settling for the 3s. And I think those are the things that you can see on film and correct. But again, like, God forbid we have another injury-plagued season. I feel much better about potentially sliding in someone like Schroder in as a starting point guard, as you mentioned, as a Jeff Teague or a Pritchard as a rookie. So I'm excited, but there's also questions we just don't know because we haven't seen him play.
Greeny, has IT reached out to you directly via DM to thank you for being his Twitter agent yet?
Listen, we've communicated back and forth. I actually thought I was about to break a little scoop, but it ended up not happening. I just can't imagine that there isn't a role for him on any roster in the NBA when there are guys that I know are not as good as a healthy Isaiah Thomas. It's one of the weirder, like when he was on Washington in those 40 games, he was putting up, 12 and 3 on 40% from 3. You're telling me there isn't one roster spot in the entire league for that? I refuse to believe it.
I can only imagine how, like the super fan in Greeny feels when he's getting DMs from Isaiah Thomas talking about the future of his NBA career.
Well, yeah, we go way back. My love for him started when he was at Washington. I was at Arizona State. He had that buzzer beater step back over University of Arizona. So from there, I was like, all right, this is my guy. And I just think he has more left in the tank. And I think if he is truly healthy and that hip is 100%, there is a spot for him in the NBA. And I will not stop tweeting about it until it happens. That is a promise.
All right. Well, what we will stop is this show, but we've covered a lot, and I'm curious to see obviously what happens in preseason games to come, depending on when you're listening. Hopefully it is here on release day, a Friday, because this team is playing tomorrow, Saturday, against Toronto. It's the next preseason game, the second of 4. They've got another one not until Wednesday after that against Orlando again. So you got to wait a few days. I know, Greeny, it's going to be driving him nuts. And then the 15th, the last one, that is a week from today against Miami. And then we'll be all fixated on the regular season at that point in time. So we just got to grind through a few more of these and see what direction they go. There are definitely trends that we saw in game 1 that I'm interested to see what they look like in game 2, if in fact they are trends or if they were isolated to that first game, but we'll be able to talk more about that come next week. But obviously, once again, want to remind you the show is brought to you by our friends at the Legends brand. You can go to legends.com, use the promo code. It is BEAT20, BEAT20, 20% off your whole order. Offer ends on Sunday, October 10th. It's coming up quick, so make sure you take advantage. Again, Evan rocking the sweatshirt. I got a t-shirt right here. It's awesome. Make sure you do it. And Greeny, always a pleasure, bud.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you guys for having me on. Once we get some real games, we'll have to see if we're all so optimistic as we were, as we head into it. But part of it's the green Kool-Aid, but I'm just, with better health, I think we'll have a season that I think we all expect. But when has this team ever remained healthy? I think that's like, I'm knocking on every piece of what I have in my house. Like, just give me a semi to normal health season and let the chips fall where they may.
Just remember, in terms of man games lost, at least, it would be almost impossible for them to be less healthy than they were last year.
I don't know.
COVID and injury. So let us
You
pray.
say that now. You say that now.
I know. I said,
right? Like, please,
people are going to be pointing back at this very episode. October 9th is when Kaufman jinxed the entire Celtics season. Thanks a lot. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. Subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff on iTunes. We'll catch you again next week.
All right. Thank y'all.